Hello, my name is John Hansen and I'm with the Hall County Historical Society. And normally each year in January, I would give a presentation for the Society at the Burlington train station on some aspect of Antique Christmas. Well, this year and technically last year, with COVID, we are not able to meet in person. So I decided to do a virtual open house and talk about some of the decorations and ornaments that I have on display. And here is the main tree, and all of the ornaments and decorations on it are figural ornaments. For example, we have this clip-on bird. All of these ornaments date from basically turn of the century through probably the 40s or 50s. Here is a clip-on Santa. And with these figural ornaments, the majority of them were made in Germany not by like big companies, but by individual artisans, and whatever they thought of is what they would make. There was no rhyme or reason. For example, some collectors call this a fantasy ornament. You do have like a little house or cottage below, but then you have this just kind of geometric shape above it. And other ornaments. This is basically a butterfly, and this is spun glass for the wings and just kind of a clay composition body. Here's another, what they would call kind of a fantasy ornament. Here is Santa coming out of a chimney, or going into a chimney. Here's basically a horn ornament. The lighting on the tree is from the 20s and 30s. And as some of you may remember, with this lighting, it was called series lighting. So if one bulb was loose or burned out, that whole string would go out. So you had to get a good bulb, unscrew each bulb, screw in your good bulb until the set lit again, and then you would then have found the bad bulb. Some of the different lights. This is called a Japanese crystal star, and just Japanese because that's the country where they were made. But it has a metal center and then glass tips, and then the bulb is inside to light it up. Otherwise, just cone type bulbs. Another figural ornament, little Christmas tree. And that's basically the highlights of this tree. Again, figural ornaments and lighting from the 20s and 30s. Here on this pedestal are what collectors would call either Victorian Christmas lamps or fairy lamps. And what they are, they're just glass, and originally, they would have had an oil and water mixture within it with a floating wick to light it. And a lot of people would have them, they would be used for like garden parties, but they could also have been hung on the Christmas tree. And some of them still have the original wire around it, and you would have hung it on the tree to illuminate it. A lot of them were made in Austria, Germany. Some were made in France, and some were also made here in the US. And again, they date from the turn of the last century, so late 1800s, early 1900s. And here in this bowl is some of my figural lights. Just as we had the figural ornaments on the tree, they made light bulbs that were figures. This is an owl. We have a banana. We have either like a rose or a tulip. Here we have an orange. And these can date anywhere, not these particular ones, because unfortunately I don't have that old of ones, but they started making these shortly after the first light bulbs were coming out. So again, late 1800s, early 1900s through the 50s. Again, anything that the manufacturer could think of, they made it. On top of the hutch here, I have a bunch of what they called bottle brush trees. And they called them bottle brush trees because the brushes that you would have used, especially back in, say, the 50s and 60s and 70s to clean bottles, it's just a stiff kind of plastic that was intertwined within a wrapped spiral of metal, and it was a bottle brush. Well, this is basically the same principle, except they're Christmas trees, and there's different heights here. The lighting, the green chandelier here and the red chandelier here were made by a lighting company called Royal, and it's just a plastic base with the Royal bubble lights in it. They also made kind of a, I'll say, cream marbleized colored base, and there was also a blue base. The lights here are more of the series lights, and these lights here are what us collectors call Mazda candles, and it's just, they're one of my favorite of the Christmas lighting. Then down below here, I have some of my old Christmas china and Christmas glasses, and this, with this design here. And these glasses are probably from the 50s through probably the early 70s. Then here we have with Santa. And with the china, this is earlier than the glasses, basically turn of the century, early 1900s. This plate here is an advertising plate, and it says souvenir of Atwater, Minnesota. But a lot of them are just, some of them are like child's tea sets, so they're smaller size. And this one has Santa in kind of a, I'll say, Zeppelin type transportation, and he's throwing gifts and candies out to the children down below. This set basically just says Merry Christmas, and it has a Christmas angel and Santa bringing a tree. The different cups and saucers here just has different depictions of Santa within it or on them. Here Santa is in a car and giving a doll to the girl. And this one has Santa probably in his workshop making toys for the children. The three trees here on this little table are showing just some examples of some different Christmas lighting. This tree here has kind of a smaller version of what a lot of collectors would call lighted ice. This rotating tree here has what are called matchless stars, and they're called matchless because they were made by the Matchless Light Company in Chicago, and they came out in the late 20s, and they are actually cut glass that was cut and manufactured in Czechoslovakia, and then it was shipped over to, again, the Matchless Light Company in Chicago, and they made these different colored lights. And they're one of the most collectible lights now for collectors, just because of their beauty. And unfortunately, when they were made, they weren't on the market for a very long time, so they are somewhat hard to find. And the final tree here are called glow light candles, and they kind of look like a bubble light. They actually came out a few years before bubble lights, but these have just the plastic base, and then this is a solid glass rod that lights up from the bulb hidden within the base. But it's kind of, again, they look like bubble lights, and that's when bubble lights were first came out. That's what these were, the bubble lights were modeled after. They used the same base on the first bubble lights by a company called Noma. So these are kind of the precursor of the bubble lights. This tree here, some of you may think that it is one of the aluminum trees from the 50s and 60s. It does look very similar to the aluminum trees. It's basically manufactured the same way, with individual branches that would just insert into a center pole. But this tree, these branches, are not aluminum. This is a vinyl tree, and it's basically, these needles, if you want to call them that, are basically vinyl, a type of plastic, and that's what this tree is made of. So it's not one of the aluminum trees, but a vinyl tree. And what I have on it are basically an assortment of old stockings. And this one says Daddy, and we have one that says Johnny. And this one just says Merry Christmas. And this one says Season's Greetings. And it's just an assortment. I thought I would do something different for the decorations, and I thought the stockings would be a different change of pace. So that is this tree. This display here, the two trees are German feather trees, and they are an artificial tree made, again, late 1800s through early to mid 1900s. And the green on the branches are actual like goose and turkey feathers. And they would take the feather and they would dye it whatever color they wanted. Then they would peel the feather from the quill, wrap or tie off one end of the feather to a piece of wire and wrap that feather around that piece of wire till they came to the end of the feather, tied off that end, and would continue on until they had a complete branch. This tree here has candles on it and angels, and these are waxed angels, and it's basically a mixture of wax and sawdust that they would mold into these angels. This one here, unfortunately, she had lost an arm at some point in her life, but still a nice example. This tree here, another feather tree with candles and beaded ornaments. A lot of these beaded ornaments were made in Czechoslovakia. Some were made in Japan. This here, a watering can, and it actually still has the paper label on it that says made in Czechoslovakia. Here we have a spinning wheel. A little sailboat. There's also this might be a little basket with maybe jewels hanging from it. This just, again, kind of like with the Figaro ornaments, whatever the artisan decided to make as a design. This one, I always considered it a kite. And then the smaller ornaments, again, we have more bottle brush trees. There's a couple red ones there. This one has glass beads wrapped around it. And then all of the figures. This is an early plastic called celluloid, and it was actually a very good plastic in as much as they could mold it very easily into different shapes. But unfortunately, it also, with children might be playing with it, it dented easily and the dent would not come out. So it's somewhat hard to find examples in good condition, especially if they were played with kind of roughly by the children. But again, all different shapes and designs. Santa here pulling a sled with a tree in the back in presents. Again, Santa in a train. And down below, on this shelf is different paper mache items. Santa with his bag of toys. Paper mache is basically kind of a thick cardboard type material that was used to make different type of ornaments. This Santa with his basket, and parents might have put some candy or a little toy in there for the children. Paper mache boots, and again they had a hole in it so they could have been filled with maybe candy or toys. Another paper mache boot. This is a chalkware piece made out of chalk, made by a company, if I remember right, called Miller. And this dates, I believe, from the 30s. And they made all kinds of different designs and different styles of basically chalkware display pieces. Here in this corner, we have what us collectors call bubble light trees. And the first ones actually came out, I believe, late 20s, early 30s, not for bubble lights, but they would have had just maybe bulbs like this for them. But when bubble lights came out, the different companies got the idea to put the bubble lights in the trees. And again, it's just an artificial tree, and it has the electrical sockets worked into the tree, wired into the tree. And they kind of had a resurgence in the 40s and 50s. A lot of times they were advertised, you know, buy one for grandma so she can still have a tree, or just for maybe smaller apartments. This tree here has again, by a company called Royal, the Royal bubble lights. This tree here has Paramount, and if you're able to see on this tree, the bubbles are going a lot faster. These bubbles are going a lot slower because, again, Paramount oil bubble lights. The oil might have been castor oil or cod liver oil, and so obviously a thicker liquid, so the bubbles are going up a lot slower. This wreath here is basically a cellophane plastic wreath that has 8 sockets worked within the wreath, and just the different light bulbs on it. This is kind of a, you know, kitschy type ornament, probably late 60s, and it's just a styrofoam car, and it has Santa in it, and with different decorations on the car. Again, another bubble light tree, but I have just the small cone bulbs in it. And this sign here might have been used in a store, and it just says Season's Greetings on it. This here is actually the front page of a newspaper, and it's a local newspaper. It's the Hamilton County Advocate, Aurora, Nebraska, and it is dated Tuesday, December 14th, 1916. And again, it's the front page of their newspaper. Beautiful cover. Children, Christmas morning, in front of the tree. The stockings are filled with toys. We have toys down around the fireplace, and it's just a great example of what the newspapers way back when did for their Christmas editions. This piece here is actually an advertising piece, advertising Westinghouse Mazda lamps, and it would have been set up at Christmas time in a general store, hardware store, and probably around it would have been different boxes of Westinghouse Christmas lights. And this has actual bulbs around it that on the back side, this is just cardboard. On the back side, the company could have put their string, the electrical string, wired them all up, and had it lit for the Christmas season. Over here on this tree are what are called XL PAT bulbs. XL meaning extra life. And again, with the old lighting, if one bulb was loose or burned out, that entire, what we would say, string would go out. With this bulb, if it would burn out, there was what they called a shunt device, which would allow the electrical current to continue on to the other bulbs. So you would still have your one burned out bulb, but the rest of the bulbs would remain lit, so you could find the burned out bulb more easily. This is a cast iron wreath with a bulb in the center. And this was made by a company called Glow Light, and it's just a wire frame, has basically plastic cellophane wrapped around it with the different bulbs in it. And it was just basically a tabletop or maybe mantle type display piece. Inside the cabinets are just a few of my Christmas lighting boxes. Lighting is my main love, and I've been collecting old Christmas since the 1980s, and just on the boxes, just the graphics are one of the things that has attracted me to collecting these boxes and the artwork on them. A couple more different examples. Santa lights with Edison Mazda lamps, starlight reflectors. This is one of my favorites. American decorative lighting outfit. Shield with the eagle, red, white, and blue. And then you have Santa with the Christmas lights. And like I said, just the artwork used on a lot of these boxes is just outstanding, in my opinion. Another box, Stanley permanent safety resistance Christmas decoration lamps. This glass cabinet here has some of my more favorite Christmas lights within it. Again, the different boxes with the great graphics on it. Down below, some of the larger figural Christmas lights. And on the top shelf, I talked about celluloid Christmas ornaments. They also made celluloid Christmas lights, but those would have been run on a battery operated set because celluloid is very flammable, and so they needed a lower voltage for the lights. The matchless stars that you remember on the tree upstairs, here's the larger size that they made. And on top of the cabinet, the two trees on the end were made by a company called Royal, and basically it's just the comb bulb, and then the plastic, I'll say base, is the bottom of the Royal bubble light, and they actually made those to be sold that way. The chandeliers here in the center are also by the Royal Lighting Company, but these are much earlier, and it's very hard to find these tapered like this. A lot of chandeliers you'll find tapered like this. These with that type of taper are a lot harder to find. This tree here has glow in the dark icicles on it, and just as it says, they would glow in the dark, and from the 50s. This, as just like with the car that I talked about earlier, is made out of styrofoam with different Christmas decorations on it, and it's actually a music box, and I actually won't wind it up so that we don't have the music playing over me, but you would wind it up, and then the music box or this top carousel would rotate. This item here is made out of horsehair plaster, and it has the sockets molded within the display piece. A lot of times these were store display pieces, and actually I got this here in town, and it was found downtown in one of the old buildings that was the old Penny's store. It was found in the attic, and so it was probably a store display for the Penny's store back in the day. And this would be, say, 20s and 30s era. Here we have another front of a newspaper, and this comes a little bit further away. This is from Iowa, and this is dated 1914, and it's their special Christmas edition. And again, we have Santa sitting in front of a tree surrounded by children. And earlier, as I talked about scrap ornaments for the tree, this came out of a large scrapbook, because on the back side, or what would be the next page, we have all of these different scraps that, probably a child or a mother had cut out of different magazines and put in their scrapbook. Here on top of this cabinet, we have some smaller feather trees, and as you can see, there are a couple of white ones. Again, the people who made them would dye the feathers whatever color they wanted, green being the most popular, then white, but there are also different shades of green, and there's even been like blue and other assorted colors. The figures here on the top, a lot of these are candy containers, and like the snowman, this bottom would open up. It's hollow inside, and there might have been candy or a small toy in it for the child. This boot has basically a net, and it opened up, and again, could be filled with candies. This small cardboard Santa with reindeer had an opening in the center, again, for candy or toys. This bell had an opening. There would have originally been a cardboard, I'll say, stopper that would have inserted into it. This kind of snowball ornament with Santa would open up and put candy in it, and it actually says made in U.S. Zone Germany, so this would date it to right after the ending of World War II. These little ornaments or figures I always was intrigued by. I've never seen any other ones like it, but they're just, I'm going to say, kind of a snowman figure, but with holly leaves as the body, and on the bottom, made in Japan. So again, kind of just whatever manufacturers could think of, they made different ornaments. These little cotton, this is basically spun cotton skier ornaments, and this item here would kind of fold up, and then you would extend it for display purposes. Another container, candy container, little woven basket, again, a little net bag that could be opened up, again, to put candies or a small toy in for the child. Another stocking with the net to get, again, put candy or toys in. Here on top of this cabinet, we have these revolving trees, and it's just a cardboard tree that has slits cut in it, and we have this bulb underneath with this piece of metal that the tree would balance on, and the heat from the bulb as it passed through the tree would then, you have to get it exactly positioned right, as the heat would pass through the slits within the tree, then it would start to rotate. The trees over here, as I talked about the bubble light trees, this one is a little different in that it has just a bulb in the center. The tubes go into the tree, and the heat from that center bulb would then activate the tubes, and they would start bubbling. And the tree back there has what we call transformer bulbs in it. The tree is run on a transformer, and the bulbs just blink off and on. And again, that tree, like the bubble light trees, is from the 40s and 50s. And this tree in the center has glass candy canes, and we kind of will call these icicles, but that is the ornaments on this tree. These two pictures here are actually crepe paper. Back in the day, 20s, 30s, 40s, different companies, paper manufacturing companies, made long panels that would have these pictures just repeating. This one picture would be on the same panel. It might be 15 feet long, and you'd have another panel with that as the repeating picture. And they were used, you might have put it around, if the children were having a party, you might have taped that around the table where they were going to eat, or you might have put it along the top of the wall. But again, it's just crepe paper, and what I did is I had found a couple rolls, and then I cut out a panel, one of the panels, and had it framed. And these date, again, probably from the 30s. Well, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this tour of my home and just some of the ornaments and lighting that I've collected through the years. Again, I've been collecting since the 1980s and still looking for items. Some of you may not know, there is an international organization called the Golden Glow of Christmas Past, and it's basically a collector society, and we get together once a year in some part of the country, and we have educational talks, and people sell ornaments and lighting and decorations and stuff out of their hotel rooms, and it's a chance for us like-minded collectors to get together and talk about our collections and learn more things. And again, thank you for joining me today. This is on behalf of the Hall County Historical Society, and we have many different events still planned for this upcoming year. And check out our Facebook page, and you can get more information on different upcoming events that we will have. And thank you, and Happy New Year.